Greetings, humans.
Welcome to another episode of Humans of the Multiverse, where we share the stories of our friends from all over the globe.
We hope you find this conversation interesting and uplifting. Our goal is to bring people together, so if you enjoy the interview, we'd love to hear your comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Today, we are very excited to feature Dr. Greg Little. Dr. Little is author or co-author of over 60 books. He is co-author of all MRT Moral Reconation Therapy workbooks, which have had over 4 million participants. He is a nationally certified psychologist, retired, specializing in criminal psychology, and he's a certified life coach.
Dr. Little has authored textbooks in psychopharmacology, personality disorders, counseling, crisis intervention, obesity, and other areas of counseling. Dr. Little has been featured on 15 different documentaries, presented on 10 different network TV channels. He has also been a guest on over 300 radio shows. Leave a comment about your favorite part of today's discussion.
And I have some authority in some things, but I'm probably wrong more than I'm right. And I'm often asked, what do you really know about this? And I tell people, well, I probably know less than nothing. And the reason that I say that is, statistically speaking, probably more than half of what I think I know is wrong. Therefore, I'm in the negative category. It's like maybe minus 10%. So I know less than nothing.
Well, how we came across you was we started to do our own kind of mini mound. We started this YouTube channel like literally 4 months ago after meeting at Cosmic Summit last year. Mm-hmm. And I had been all these, we were trying to visit all the mound sites in our area. And you made a comment that was like, all the mound sites? Are you sure? Yeah. And I was like, I think so. And you're like, well, that sounds like quite the task. And then I started looking into your work, and I was like, holy crap. Was I understating the, the significance of the mound culture? And that's why we both ordered your book, and we reached out. And so I guess that's why you're here, and that's why we're really excited to have you.
All right.
Welcome to the show. It's great to meet you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. And we'll see where this goes. But have you visited all the mounds in Georgia yet?
No. So we just did Etowah and in Kolomoki. We're planning a trip with another YouTuber named Tyrone from Rebirth of the Word. We're going to be driving north from here to Serpent Mound, from Atlanta to Serpent Mound, and hitting some of the big ones along the way. Yeah. Then we're driving west to meet a friend in St. Louis and checking out Monk's Mound, as well as the other one that's in the area there, right next to St. Louis. I forget off the top of my head.
Well, there's one left in St. Louis. St. Louis, downtown St. Louis, used to have a massive walled mound complex in it. The last mound was destroyed in 1869, and it was called Big Mound. It was absolutely gigantic, and they used a steam shovel to destroy it. And it was associated with Cahokia. Yeah. But you need to go to Ocmulgee. Ocmulgee is in Georgia. Mm-hmm. It's you haven't been there yet. I didn't hear you mention it.
No, we haven't.
It's a federal park, and it has some gigantic mounds. It also has a fully reconstructed it's actually underground, and you can go in and you can see all the seats and so on. And mm-hmm. There is an eagle effigy on the floor, and it's just fantastic. It's worth going to. The problem with saying I'm going to visit all the mounds is that there are probably 3,000 or 4,000 mounds still in Georgia.
Yeah.
3,000 or 4,000. Most of them are on private property. They're not accessible. And a lot of them are in swampy areas near rivers, very hard to get to. And I haven't even gotten close to visiting most of the mounds in the United States. I have gone to all the sites that are easily accessible. Most of the sites that are parks I've been to, although more and more are being made. And I once estimated we've been to about 3,000 mound sites. I don't know how many mounds that adds up to, but probably 8 to 10,000 mounds that we've seen, and that's not even close to how many still exist.
Yeah, it's just a fraction, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned mounds that are available to the public and those that aren't, and it reminded me right away, because I just read in your primer on visiting mounds and mound culture that you've seen evidence of some mounds where the sides were formed by mortarless stone walls, and then in the very next sentence you're like, but good luck finding those, they're mostly on private land. Can you tell us a little more about, there's some different type of mounds you've seen?
Sure. Most people think that mounds are just simply earthen constructions. Some that, and you know, the simplest mound is a conical mound. It looks like the top of an ice cream cone. They can be really small, 2 to 3 feet tall, 20, 30, 40 feet in diameter, or they can get huge. The biggest one is right now, it's in Miamisburg, Ohio. It's 69 feet tall. It's just gigantic. So if you went to the top of that mound and started digging down, if you got down about 6 feet, what you hit at the Miamisburg mound is you hit casing stones under about 6 feet of earth. It has a layer of stone. So if you went beneath that, you're going to get to more and more and more dirt. Eventually, you'll hit burials. Those are intrusive burials because the mound was built over stages. It started relatively small, and they kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. Down at the bottom of it, as it is with many burial mounds, at the base or in the sub-base, which meant they dug down in to the surface and they built a stone chamber there. Sometimes the stone chambers have logs for the sides. Sometimes they have a log roof. Others actually have the big slabs of stone that form the roof. So a lot of burial mounds have stone chambers on the inside. Some platform mounds are the most impressive ones. Cahokia's Monk's Mound is a platform mound. It was multi-layered. It's 100 feet tall. It was taller when it was first found, but it's eroded some. So some of those platform mounds actually started out by having dry stone masonry. That's the way to put it. So it's stacked stones, flat stones, stacked up in whatever formation you want to make the mound with. And then in the interior, they usually put a lot of dirt. Sometimes there is a central stone structure in the inside that was used for either a tomb or a crematorium. A place where this happened, I can give you two off the top of my head. One is in a place called Lost City, Kentucky, which best goes by the name of the Page site. There were 87 mounds at the Page site. Inside of this huge fortress that had walls around it were giant platform mounds, and all those platform mounds had stone exteriors to them. They didn't look like the ones that you might see if you go, say, to the Yucatan, where you'll see this really good stone masonry, and all that's been restructured, by the way. That isn't the way it looked when it was found. But they had the dry masonry walls with the stacked stones. So all the ones inside the Page site were that way. There's another set of earthworks called the Turner site in Ohio, 100% obliterated. It was gigantic, hard to even describe what it was. But inside of a giant circular earthwork, there were seven mounds that were connected to each other. Conjoined mounds, 7 big mounds. All of those turned out to be large burial mounds or crematorium mounds, and all of them had these stone walls forming the exterior. Now, there were others of those, but the weird thing about these stone wall mounds is that when the first settlers came into these places, as early as the late 1700s, even into the 1800s in some places, the settlers found all of these stacked stones, and they used them for their own buildings. They literally took the stones, removed them, and they used them for their own building construction. So how many of these are left? Some, not many. because they were literally destroyed, as were 90% of the mounds. So
similar to what they did in Egypt with all the everything there, right?
Exactly. Same thing happened in Mexico. The great cathedral in Mexico, in the center of Mexico City, the stones that built that made up the giant pyramid in the center of Tenochtitlan. It was just looted, taken apart to build that cathedral, which is what happens. One civilization builds on the prior civilization, and it goes way back. And the same thing happened with mounds. Mounds are much older than most people think. They go way, way back, and mound sites were lived in a minimum of hundreds of years, but most of the mound sites in North America were lived at for a few thousand years, 3, 5, 6,000 years. Some of them in the South, in the far South in Louisiana, the oldest one known today dates to 9,000 BC, 11,000 years ago. And that's just astonishing. But there are loads of them in Louisiana and in Mississippi that are about 7,000 years old.
Wow. So
it's like a slot machine, isn't it? You put a nickel in and pull it, and then the whole bunch comes out.
I mean, that's why you're here. Like when I was looking at your ex, I follow your ex. It's like this guy posts more than Elon. He loves this mound stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess that would be the next question: is how? I've read a little bit about it, but we'd like to hear it from you. How did you go from criminal justice to Edgar Cayce and writing a book about Edgar Cayce and mound culture?
Yeah, well, okay. That's a good question. So I never got out of the criminal justice or the criminal psychology work. I still write books in that field. I don't talk about that much, but I'm still writing books in the field of criminal justice treatment. But I have always been interested in strange experiences. And when I was in graduate school, a number of the things that we were really interested in, this was in the early 1970s. I started graduate school in 1972 in psychology. And my area was psychopharmacology, which is the study of how drugs work in the brain. And at that time, the New Age was really popular. And I had a professor, my major professor, who had a PhD from Vanderbilt. He was a psychopharmacologist. His wife was an MD psychiatrist also from Vanderbilt. And they kind of took me under their wing, definitely. And they started taking me to things that they were going to investigate. And some of those things were like Uri Geller spoon bending parties. Are you familiar with those?
Oh yeah.
Trance channeling was something they took me to. People were doing all sorts of things. And I watched the spoon bending, tried it, didn't work for me. I was always very skeptical of all the trance channeling that I went to with them. I always went with them. And then in the laboratories, we had these huge laboratories. It was a very high-ranked program at the time, and we decided to test out a whole bunch of things that were in the literature, such as pyramid power. People would claim that if you built a pyramid and you had the exact right dimensions to it, you could put a dull razor blade in it, and the razor blade would sharpen. They also said that you could put plants in it and plants would grow faster, things like that. So we literally built the pyramids and we tested it out. The razor blades did not get sharp and the plants did not get better. They didn't grow faster. In fact, they didn't do too well inside of the pyramids.
Right.
Another thing that we tested that did work, however, and this we never wrote up, but we tested this and retested it, and we used a 9-channel physiograph, and we tested, could a philodendron, did philodendrons have feelings? A giant philodendron plant. So we wanted to know if philodendrons had some form of awareness or consciousness. And I didn't make up this study. It was two professors that decided, let's do this. So here's what they did. They put the philodendron in a lab with the physiograph, and they connected the leads to the philodendron to see what kind of electrical impulses that it had. And sure enough, philodendrons have electrical impulses. It's the same thing that you would do if you were doing an EEG and EKG in a human. You'd have all the leads around your head, and then you'd have some connected on your chest for breathing and for heart rate and so on. You'd also look for a GSR, galvanistic response. And so we did that with the philodendron. Then they had 6 of us graduate students reach in and pull out a piece of paper. And we went into separate areas. We weren't allowed to say what was on our paper, but we opened it up. And in mine, it said, walk into the room and stand there for 1 minute. Don't touch the plant, just stand there for a minute. So I walked into the room when it was my turn, and I simply stood there a minute, and then I left. One of the 6 of us, on the piece of paper, it said, walk into the room and tear a leaf. Stay in there for 1 minute and then walk out. And then in the next step, we would walk in one by one and stand for 1 minute. Meanwhile, the 2 professors were analyzing what the skin response, the GSR, galvanistic skin response, and what the physiograph said, and they were able to easily determine the person who tore the leaf, because when that person came into the room, it all went like this. They could tell. With the rest of us, it was a nice, steady response. We repeated this experiment several times. They didn't have any idea how in the world are we going to write this up? What are we going to do with it? So we didn't really do anything. In recent years, this kind of thing has been replicated in different ways. Plants, trees, and so on. And it is very likely that plants and trees of all kinds have some sort of awareness. I'm not saying it's conscious awareness like we might have, but they can sense things. Maybe I've believed for years that it's electromagnetic in nature, that they're sensing electromagnetic fields, but that's another whole story. So, okay, to take this up, yes, sir.
Would the results of that experiment, would that constitute memory of the 6 people remembering which person, or is it more like just a dog detecting a smell that they don't like, or is that memory?
Well, you could say the dog smell is also memory too sometimes, or noxious. There's such a thing as a noxious smell.
Yep.
My dog or our dog can sense the difference between my wife and I, which she can too, for that matter. But
the noxious odor of something rotting, we have an instinctual memory to avoid
exactly.
that.
That's
but 1 out of 6 people that tore a leaf, could be their cologne.
So it could be memory. My master's thesis was done on memory in houseflies. And that's another, we use this bizarre drug called cyclohexamide. And all this, while I was doing all this, I was intensely interested in UFOs, because you were asking about how did I go from one area to another. So I had this interest in UFOs. But this drug, cyclohexamide, was really interesting. I actually brought that experiment into my first book, which was about UFOs, but it was mainly about Carl Jung. So all these experiments led me to that. This was my first book. It's called The Archetype Experience. And it was a follow-up to Carl Jung's last book, published in 1959, called Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies. And because nobody ever understood Jung, I decided I'd write a follow-up. And that was in 1982, after I got my doctorate. And I waited till I got my doctorate, because I knew that, my God, if I write about this stuff, I'm going to have trouble from all the academics. So I waited. The moment I got out of my final dissertation defense, I started working on that book. So in that book, I talked about Edgar Cayce. And the reason is that Cayce and Casey's abilities were sometimes mentioned in psychology textbooks, and I had an interest in it. And
Mhm.
again, I believe all this stuff is electromagnetic and plasma based, another story. But that's how it started. So I finished writing this book in 1983, and I started shopping around for a publisher, which I did back then. How you did this is you wrote the manuscript, you had to print up a bunch of copies, and you'd mail them out to a publisher, and you'd wait. You'd send the query, and you'd wait, and you'd wait, and you'd wait. It took roughly about a year for a publisher to say, okay, and then another year for it to get out. But after I had finished it and a publisher accepted it, I actually remember wondering, okay, what am I going to write about next? Because I was already done with UFOs. I had said what I wanted to say about it at the time. And in that 1984 book, it came out in 84, I actually wrote that plasmas were the key to UFOs, which is not a popular thing to say then. So
It certainly is now.
yeah, I was working as a mental health counselor at that time in a prison psychiatric unit. And I worked a lot, but we worked 4 shifts at a time, 4 straight days, 4 12-hour shifts. And that was it. I'm sorry, we worked 3 days and had 4 off. So we'd work 3 days, 12 hours at a time, and then have 4 days off. That way you have to have 2 mental health counselors available per day. So I had a lot of time off. And out of nowhere, this was in 1983, I had this dream. And it became a recurring dream that occurred for about a week, night after night. And at first it was just weird. Then it got disturbing. And in the dream, again, from nowhere, I was standing on an Indian mound, and I had a camera, and I took a picture. And then I found myself standing on another Indian mound, and I took a picture. And then another Indian mound, and took a picture. And this went on night after night after night for about a week. And it was very bizarre. And the reason it was so bizarre is I knew absolutely nothing about Indian mounds. I had never learned anything. I had never been anywhere. I often say that everything that I knew about Indian mounds at the time, I could have written on the back of a postage stamp, because I knew they were mounds and I knew Indians supposedly made them. That was it. That's all I knew. I can't even remember seeing one before this time. I'm sure I did, but nobody said, oh, that's an Indian mound. And I took no interest in it. So at the end of that, I went to my wife and I said, I don't know what the heck this is. I don't know. That night, we had a dream. Well, that night before the dream, we were in bed, and then we saw this big spider coming down from the ceiling. When I say big spider, it was about this big.
Jesus.
Very colorful spider. Absolutely true. We both kind of freaked out. We turned on all the lights. We started looking for it. We knew it came down on the bed. We literally took everything apart, got in the closet, looked everywhere. Couldn't find it. And we sat down and we decided we just had a folie à deux. And the reason I say that is because the lights were out. You probably didn't catch that when I gave the story, but the lights were out. We both described seeing the exact same thing. And a folie à deux is French word for joint hallucination. They're very rare. And at that point, we both decided we got to do something here. And I want to go look at an Indian mound. And the closest mound, we lived in Memphis, where we still do. The closest mound is a place called Chucalissa. It's run by the University of Memphis now. So we drove out there. And when we got there, never been there before, we walked in the door. You have to go into the museum first. And they had a display there, a big display sign. And on that display sign was the exact spider we had seen. Same color, everything.
Both of you.
Was
Yes.
that very rare to see a spider in your house, especially in your bedroom, coming down from your bedroom ceiling like that?
I've never seen anything like that again. I have seen in Guatemala a spider that is absolutely that big,
Right.
but it didn't have the same color on it. Now I
Right.
had that, and then while we were at Chucalissa, I decided that, okay, I need to go and visit every mound that exists. I don't know where this came from. I need to go to every mound that exists and make a
That was
photographic
us.
record of it. It never occurred to me that I was going to do an encyclopedia, and I can't recall exactly during the next 30 years or so when I decided to write an encyclopedia about it. So I'll hold this up because there's one more dream I want to tell you about before we move on. This is the encyclopedia, the current version. There were 2 editions of it,
Mhm.
and it's got a lot of the photos we took and other things in it. But from 1983, when this happened, to 2009, we had visited thousands and thousands of sites. They're all over the place. We were also engaging in that time in work with the Edgar Cayce organization. And literally, it was on a whim. I decided that we were going to go to the Bahamas and do some underwater searching for underwater archaeology ruins and plains like Bermuda Triangle plains. So we started that task in 2001. But in 2008, I remember thinking that if I don't write a mound encyclopedia, I may never get to do it because I'm getting kind of old and you never know what's going to happen. So I decided to do it. So I started working on it in 2008. I'd already accumulated, thousands of photos. And I was working on so many other books. I've written a lot of books on a lot of different topics. And I just became overwhelmed with the details of this, the detail about every mound, how big is it? What was found in it? Can you go to it or not? Get the pictures organized, a lot of work. And it's the first time that I had pretty much decided to write a book that I decided I'm not going to do this. And I went to my wife and I said, I'm not going to do it. And exactly what I told her is, I just keep writing the other books and I'll throw mounds in it. But I'm not going to do this because, number one, it's burning up all my time. And number two, I don't think it'll ever sell. Who in the world is going to buy an encyclopedia of Indian mounds? Nobody's going to buy it. I mean, it may sell a few hundred, but it's a waste. It's a useless project. And I felt okay. And that night, I had a nightmare. Very intense. I woke up during the nightmare because it's burned into my mind even to this day. And in that nightmare, I suddenly found myself surrounded all around me, thousands upon thousands of Native Americans, their spirits, dead Native Americans, screaming at me,
Yikes.
yelling at me, threatening me. You're a double tongue. You lie. Like all whites, you tell lies. You told us you would do this. And so the warriors were at the top screaming and threatening me. You're a lying white man. And on they went. And then as you got down, you'd get into the women. And the women were crying and say, you promised. And then there were children that were crying at the bottom. You told us you were going to do this. And it was so overwhelming. Just unbelievable, the effect that it had. I got up, told my wife, and I just had a dream. I got to do this book. So the first edition came out in 2009. When that sold out, it was reprinted. They were all hardcovers. And it went through 2 pretty big printings. I was astonished how well it sold. I realized by 2015 or so that I need to revise this thing. There's so much more. So it went from 400 pages to about 550 pages in the second edition. And the second edition is totally sold out. It's not going to be reprinted because now I'm working on the third edition. I will say this. I do want to say this. Okay, so here's the thing. The women and children at the bottom of that dream, when I said they were screaming at me, what they were saying was that they had been forgotten. That the mound culture, which was everywhere in the Americas before any Europeans came in, before their culture just instantly died out over the course of 50 years after DeSoto went through in the south and southeast, and Coronado went through the whole west, and they spread. They're the ones where all the diseases spread, and it literally wiped that culture out. And what they were telling me is that they didn't want to be forgotten. And that's about as, that's it. That is what transpired and what really led me to do this. And since then, I've had some other dreams, which I won't get into now. Maybe toward the end of this, because I've already, what have I spoken, almost 50 minutes here in this, or 40 minutes. But
this is great.
There's more going on with it about why me.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I the one? Why have I been, forced into doing this? Why is it such a cause? Because you're right. Dave said that I post a lot. Yeah, I do. I post a lot from the 1800s, from very specific people in the 1800s. During the 1800s, the Smithsonian dug into roughly 3,000 mounds. One guy, the name Clarence Bloomfield Moore from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, obliterated about 3,000 mounds. I mean, literally obliterated them when he did the excavations, because that's what most of the people wanted. Mm-hmm. Farmers have destroyed probably 200,000 to 300,000 mounds. Roads have destroyed probably 200,000 to 300,000 mounds, and buildings. The entire coast of Florida and Georgia and parts of South Carolina and North Carolina along the coast, and go on into the Gulf of, let's say Mexico, or the Gulf of America, whatever you want to call it, go across and hit Alabama's coast and Mississippi's coast and Louisiana's coast and Texas's coast. There were mounds along all these coastlines. Go out west, Oregon, Washington State, California, thousands upon thousands of mounds. San Francisco Bay alone had 450 mounds. Today, there's only 2 or 3 that remain. And some of these were just gigantic. When I'm saying gigantic, I mean they covered 10, 12 acres, 50, 60, 70, 80 feet high, all gone, destroyed. Today, I think there's like 100,000. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like how you make it a point to contrast this with the myth of the pristine America that we have been taught, sometimes at a young age in school, that European explorers arrived. There was only a handful of people here, not much to see. Then history begins, right? And we appreciate how you're giving those people a voice. So I just wanted to point that out. Sorry.
Yeah,
well, it is true. I'm doing a presentation tomorrow in 2 7th grade classes.
Cool.
In Fayetteville, Arkansas, and that's one of the things I'm ending with, the pristine myth. And the pristine myth is a term that academics use to explain what really happened. I started elementary school, as I recall, like in 1954. It gives my age away. And in 1954, it was only 7 years after the poem, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And that poem is how American history began. The only Native American stuff we ever got taught when I was in school is that the Native Americans sold Manhattan to Europeans for a handful of beads. Now, if you really did, that's the story. You used to hear that all the time. Well,
Right.
the Indians, they took a handful of beads. Well, no, what really happened is, yes, some Europeans came in and they went into a village and they found somebody in the village who said that, or at least they interpreted it as he spoke for the people. And they handed him beads and gave him a piece of paper and asked him to put an X on this. And, the land, we're gonna move in here. So that was it. So that particular individual that put the X on the paper did not speak for all the other people there.
Right.
In fact, those individuals didn't know what they were doing. They had no idea, because they had no idea of ownership of land anyway.
That's
Native
right.
Americans did not have that concept at the time. You lived on the land, you interacted with the land, you honored the land. You would move on so you didn't really destroy it, and later you'd come back to this area, but they didn't have the concept of owning land. Now, tribes did have the concept of having, kind of boundaries. They had a no man's land in between where they were. And that's well known in the East about kind of the no man's land. You can go in there and hunt, but be careful. Don't go too far. And that's where their problems occurred. Hunters from different tribes would come and interact. I'm getting off course again, but
No, this is on course. And I like the Native American philosophy, even without a detailed knowledge of geology and meteorology like we now have. They basically understood the concept that you're here on the land, and if Mother Nature wants to kick you off, you're gone. But still territories and boundaries, where it's fair to hunt and where it's not fair to hunt. I think they had it right.
I agree. Their cosmology, I actually told the story of their cosmology in 2 books, and I hardly ever hawk my books, but I got to show the cover. I showed a lot of the cosmology in this book, Path of Souls, which Andrew Collins, the British author, wrote the foreword and afterword. And I tell the story of how Andrew and I read all the Bureau of Ethnology books looking for the giant skeletons supposedly found by them.
The cover of that book is beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. I didn't make it. There's an artist that made it, but everything in their cosmology, not where it all started, but it's all here. What you have up here at the top, that is the Cygnus constellation, which is represented as an ogie in the sky. I haven't explained that, of course. This is the constellation of Scorpius. Scorpius was the ruler of the underworld. And over here is the Hand constellation. The 3 stars are the belt stars of Orion, which is the Hand constellation to the mound builders. And of course, you have a shaman. He's standing at an opening in an earthwork. And this is the Milky Way going straight up and down. And the Milky Way is the Path of Souls.
Right.
So it's all in that cover.
Very cool.
So, all right.
I wanted to ask, since you were bringing up destruction of these sites just based on, development of our society and that kind of thing, roads, all that thing. I wanted to ask what your opinion was of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. We had an experience with that at Etowah Mounds, where we were looking forward to seeing the museum, and there was just a portion of the museum we could see. We could not go into, they had you've been there, correct?
Yep, I've posted photos of everything they had in the museum.
Yeah.
What you found is the same thing. You went to Kolomoki.
Yes, we did.
Did you go into the museum there?
We did, yeah.
And was it open?
Did I mix those up? Was Kolomoki the second one?
Kolomoki's got a gigantic, it has a burial pit that you can see down into.
Yeah, that's the one that they had closed. I had that mixed up.
Okay, well, Kolomoki has incredible artifacts in it. Etowah had the white marble statues. There were actually 11 statues pulled out of the Etowah, Georgia mounds. The 2 white marble statues, it's a male-female pair. For many, many years, they had those displayed in the museum. Well, those have been pulled and they've already been repatriated. So the same thing is true at Cahokia. When you go to Cahokia, the museum at Cahokia is closed right now. It's supposedly supposed to, they've said it was going to open up in mid 2025. Now they've pushed it to the end of 2025. And now they're saying that it probably will be 2026 when it opens. So most museums that you go in today, you won't see anything that is Native American that has been removed from mounds. It's all been repatriated or it's in the process, which means they're awaiting a tribal representative to come in, an official representative, and let them know if anything that they have back there can be displayed. So my opinion of it goes back to when we started visiting mounds after those dreams and after our first visit to Chucalissa. Because when we visited at Chucalissa, you could go out. We saw the stuff in the museum, and then the first thing you went into was a fully excavated burial mound. And so you'd be down in the bottom of the burial mound, and what you would see there are the skeletal remains in situ, which means in place exactly as they were found. So you'd walk on a walkway around the top and you'd look down and you'd see these exposed skeletons.
Yep.
And there would be pottery next to them where the pottery was found. And we found the same at Dixon Mounds in Illinois. They had probably about 100 skeletons on display in the museum. And Dixon Mounds fought it for years. 1990 is when they were forced to remove them because of NAGPRA, the law NAGPRA. The same thing at Wycliffe Mounds. Moundville, Alabama had the same thing. And I got pictures of the skeletal remains at all those places. I don't put those on Twitter or X, nor will I. Yep. But I got a lot of photos, and of course the old literature is filled with it. How do I feel about it? I felt really weird seeing all those skeletal remains back in the 80s. They did that. They used to bring children's groups in from schools, and I watched some children at some of these places looking at the skeletons. And the kids were transfixed by it. You know, they're wide-eyed and mouths wide open looking at this. But I don't think that was a good thing. At the time when they did all this, when they established this, there were still arguments that, well, the people in these mounds aren't Native Americans. They were from a lost race of people. Some people believed it was a lost race of whites or whatever, you know, a mythical race. But it was the ancestor of the Native Americans, and that's been proven. And when I say it's proven through genetics. We know through modern genetics that the skeletons that were found in the mounds directly are linked to the tribes that are around today. So the ancestors of modern Native Americans built the mounds. Sorry.
It's okay. I suppose that sometimes they run into where it's like which local tribe actually has that. That's typically there's arbitration going on about that stuff. That's what the holdup is typically. Okay.
So I've had a lot of discussions with museum staff on that. And for example, in Florida, there are Calusa sites that display Calusa pottery. Well, the Calusas were killed off to the last one, supposedly. So there are no descendants of the Calusa. The Timucua, very few Timucua live today. And what happened was DeSoto went through in 1539 to 41. Coronado went through the same years in the West. So when DeSoto went through and was done in 1542, 95% of the native population died. That is not in dispute. A lot of people want to argue about it, but it's not in dispute in science or archaeology. So, you know, 95% is a lot. It means only one of every 20 Native Americans around at the time survived. And so they started moving around. If you're in a city, say, with a population of 100,000 people, and a couple of, a year later, there's only 5,000 people left, and nobody's left to bury the bodies. What are you going to do? You're going to get out of there.
Yep.
And that city becomes totally overgrown. And so there were huge movements of people back then. Starting around the year 1550, 1560, there were massive movements of the people that remained. The Seminoles are a group of people that came in, probably from the Creek areas of Alabama, came down there and became the tribes of Florida, but they're not the Calusa. So there's a lot of arguments in this. The tribes moved around.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the way the law is, that we know that they're the ancestors, and basically a tribe can claim it if they have a legal representative, people that are authorized as NAGPRA representatives. They can claim it, and the museums are cooperating now. It's sad in a way that some of their most incredible artifacts that show how amazing they were. I mean, some of their pottery and artifacts are just amazing. And the statues, people think these were primitive people. And in old books, they're called savage, older, and over and over. But they're not. DeSoto described them as extremely clean, very well dressed, colorful clothing, beautiful clothing. They had pearls, pearl necklaces. They had beautiful tattoos and paintings on their face. Their temples were described as absolutely incredible. The interiors had life-size statues. At one place where DeSoto went in Georgia, where he met the Lady of Cofaquete, the Spanish chronicles described it in detail. And at the top of a 65-foot mound, there was a temple up there that they measured. It was 40 feet wide and 100 feet long. So it was, interior was 4,000 square feet on one level. It had giant pivoting wooden doors to open up. I mean, they were on pivots, just like, and they pivoted open. They went down a hallway, and down the hallway, there were 7 pairs of life-size wooden statues that they, and hit the guys that there were 4 chroniclers with DeSoto, and those are the people that write down everything that happened, and they described it all. They said these 7 pairs of statues were matched, and they had different weapons at each pair. And when they got inside, they said all the walls were filled with wooden chests, extremely well-made wooden chests. And in front of the chests were row after row of full-size statues of humans. And the statues were covered with clothing. They had beads and pearls, strings of pearls around them. And the clothing was just beautiful.
Did they have distinguished facial features, or
all of them? And
Wow.
it's believed that the statues all represented real people who once lived. In some of these wooden chests, they found the bones of these people. And they were the earlier rulers, the shaman and the medicine people, medicine men and medicine women of the society. So lots and lots of these temples, they weren't tiny little huts. People say all the time,
Yeah.
oh, they all lived in huts. That's nonsense. That is not true. And they didn't live in wigwams. That is a total, you see these old shows and they live in wigwams. Well, that was done in the Southwest and the plains. Yes, they did live in them in historic times, because they had to be ready to pick up and move. They had to be ready to move on a moment's notice, because they were being chased down and killed.
That's literally what I learned in the 6th grade. I had to make a wigwam out of birch bark to represent the Micmac natives. I'm from Nova Scotia, and so that's who was there. But it's just so interesting to me how we got such the total, we got nothing of the full story growing up of this culture. It just blows me away. Do you have a like a conspiracy theory, for lack of a better word, of why that is?
I can tell you why it was. First of all, nobody knew all this.
Yeah.
By the 1950s, when they were writing the books, nobody knew. Now, part of this, the pristine myth, there's a really famous painting by Jacob Gast, and I think it was 1873 it came out, and it was about manifest destiny. So when the first Europeans came in, the mound sites had all been abandoned, except extreme southern Mississippi and a few other mounds in the west. They were still occupied till about 1700. But the reason they were occupied by 1700s, no Europeans had gotten there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was still unexplored land. The Louisiana Purchase, I think, was made in 1817, and it was all unexplored. No one had been there, so there were still some natives that were living in some of the mound sites then. So what had the first whites that came in, I hate using the term whites, but most of them were whites initially. When they came in, what they encountered were the few Native Americans that were left.
Yep.
All right. The mound culture had been wiped out. The evidence of the mound culture was totally overgrown. Trees, there were woods everywhere. All these cities and towns. I mean, Cahokia had a population of 50,000 in the year 1200. It was bigger than London was. 50,000 people at one mound site. There were loads of other mound towns that had populations of over 5,000. And that's only in the core area. Around those were giant agricultural areas where other people lived to handle the agriculture. Well, all these were overgrown. So the first people that came in, that's what they found. They had no idea about this. And they had, they had never read De Soto's Chronicles, because De Soto's Chronicles and the Chronicles of Coronado were written in Old Spanish, and they hadn't been translated or published. Nobody knew. I'm not sure when De Soto's Chronicles first became translated into English, but I know it wasn't well known until around the 1930s or 40s. It started being talked about. And then some archaeology textbooks in the late 1970s and 80s started talking about what was in De Soto's Chronicles. So the earliest people wrote about what they knew and what they had encountered. So they didn't really know about all this. And Manifest Destiny just kept pushing the Indians, the Native American tribes, further west, because Manifest Destiny was all about, we, the Americans, we have our destiny from God is that we are here to inhabit this land and establish a country from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And that is what we did. That's precisely what we did.
Bringing the concept of land ownership every step of the way along with us. How about that?
And now
we're pushing in, and that Nova Scotia, where you're from, that'll be ours too.
Yeah, I mean, it's you never know. That's my Canadian family's all freaking out up there about, are they going to become the 51st state?
Well,
it's an awful big state. That would be
you'd think, right?
Big state, yeah.
It's quite literally the largest landmass country in the world. So,
no, I'm not really worried about that. So,
me neither. I just know that on their news, that's what they're saying right now. So.
Yeah.
Do y'all also think there is an element coming from the materials of construction for the mounds, mainly being earthen, meaning that they're going to deteriorate and weather away much faster than, say, something like Chaco Canyon or something further in Mesoamerica that's built with, different types of stone? Is part of the reason why this history gets lost so rapidly. It becomes overgrown and eroded more quickly, I guess.
You will. There are mounds like that are totally overgrown that you'll see in farmers' fields, and I've posted pictures of them. I know the names of most of them now. It's kind of hard to find information on it. You have to spend a lot of time doing that. I lived in libraries for years. So did my wife. We both wrote a lot. We were both academics. I taught at LSU Shreveport for a long time and other colleges, but that these, uh, the answer is no. Really well-made mounds. I'll give you an example. There was a site in Louisiana called the Troyville Mounds in Troyville, Louisiana. They were still present in 1830. And it had an 89-foot mound in the center, pretty close to as tall as Monk's Mound in Cahokia. And it was a multi-level platform mound that went up. And on the top, it had a literal cone of earth that made it 89 feet high. Nothing was growing on it. In 1830, when it was seen and illustrated by the first Europeans to see it. And then they decided, well, we need to destroy this thing. And we need to destroy the site. It had a huge earthen wall around it that was still there. And what they found and described is exactly the way other mounds were. And here's the thing. They couldn't destroy it easily at first. They got out there and they had to use pickaxes. And because it had been covered with a type of clay that when it gets baked and it gets hard, which Louisiana sun will bake clay, it gets as hard as concrete. And the rain, when it would hit it, would just flow right off. And actually, after they started cutting it, then they had with picks, they had to go in and use picks to get rid of the cone. And then they brought in steam shovels to remove the rest of it. Wow. You can see those remains under the bridge there because they used all that to build up the foundation to put a bridge across. And the rest of that site, 99% of it's gone because it had numerous mounds there and a giant wall of earth that enclosed it. They built some elevated areas for houses there. So that's in Troyville, Louisiana. The same thing is found at lots of other sites. So they were hardened. We know at a complex in Shiloh, Tennessee, which is in the Shiloh Civil War battlefield. There is a mound complex there. In the year 1200 is when it reached its height. The mounds there they have found were covered with hardened, multicolored clay, and they were colored red. And they probably used a pigment on it, a paint that solidified it. But then over 700 years or so, it has become, it's softened, and then trees and vegetation starts growing, and trees actually destroy mounds.
Yep.
And I've shown pictures of it. Most people think trees stop erosion. Well, they do, but over hundreds of years they don't, because they die and they fall over. And when they fall over, the roots pull up soil, rain gets down there, and it starts eroding it like crazy. That's the problem. So over hundreds of years, trees will destroy mounds.
So in the short term, they help hold the dirt together, but in the long term, the growth of those roots can ruin structures, and then they fall over.
They do ruin structures. There's no doubt about it. And that's why today, modern mounds they're removing all the trees. Can you guys show a screenshot of something here? A screen video? Something that I do? To demonstrate really how big some mounds are. That is me walking down the ramp of this platform mound at Winterville, Mississippi. Yeah, that's me.
Wow.
That is how big this is. And this is not close to the biggest mound in the country. This is at a site that had like 15 giant mounds like this. It is right along the Mississippi. The Mississippi River is out in the distance, but when this was used, like in the 1200s, the river was a lot closer to it. And that's me walking up this mound. You can see right to the right-hand side, that is another mound over there. Of course, this is the biggest one there.
It's gorgeous.
This will give you an idea of how big these really are. There's just simply no way to tell how big these are till you walk on them or get to them. But even from the ground, they don't really look that big. Back in the 80s, when I first went to that mound, they had a gigantic structure on it. And of course, it costs money to maintain it, so they decided to remove it then. And they let it get overgrown. They let some trees grow on it. But the Mississippi decided to spend some money, so they spent $200,000 to remove all the growth on it and rebuild it to where it was. Pretty spectacular, I think.
Yeah, I'd never seen that one before. It dwarfs some of the ones that we visited here in Georgia as well.
Actually, the Etowah Mounds and the Kolomoki Mound, I have a video of the Kolomoki Mound also, but the Kolomoki Mound was once 75 feet tall.
Wow.
If that's where you actually went, they removed 20 feet off of the top of the big Kolomoki platform mound, and it's much bigger than this one. If you go to Etowah, Georgia, the big mound at Etowah, I believe it's 62 feet tall. So it's a lot bigger than this one.
That one looked like way broader with a much wider approach to it.
Well, they've rebuilt the ramp on this one. So yeah, it looks bigger from the air, but it's not as big as the ones you were at. And like I said, you just cannot tell. This is about the only way you can tell.
We had a difficult time with that when we were visiting the sites, getting pictures and video that really did them justice for our content, because
you're standing on top. You see out in the distance, you're like, oh, this is a great picture. It's going to capture the magnitude of everything. You take the picture and you look at it and you're like, it doesn't do it.
Not because we're standing there going, wow. And then when we look at the pictures when we get home, it's like, oh, wait.
Yeah, I know. Well, we can pull up another one if you want to.
Yeah.
All right, so you'd want to break this here.
Yep.
This video is Pinson Mounds in Pinson, Tennessee. And now you look at this, it doesn't look that big. This is the second tallest mound in the United States, and it's a lot larger than the one you just saw. But you really can't tell from the ground. That's me walking up it there. This is 72 feet tall. And you'll get an idea of what the view is like up there. Pinson had 35 mounds at it initially. If you look it up today, they'll say, oh, it's 12 or 13 mounds because that's all that's left. It is very, very large. It doesn't have it doesn't have a ramp on it. So that's a direct, straight down aerial of it. And this particular shot here will give you an idea of how big it really is.
Wow.
This mound has never been excavated. It is in a Tennessee State Park. And they recently removed all the trees off. This is a mound at Pinson. This is the oldest, not the oldest, but it used to be touted as the oldest platform in the United States, platform mound. And it is 2,400 years old. And this is a dual burial mound called Twin Mounds at Pinson. And I was actually inside of this when it was being excavated back in the early 1980s. I got some black and white photos of what they found on the interior of that. But there are a lot of these mounds that, again, you just cannot tell how big they are. I mean, these look small, but they're not. They are not at all small. The Pinson site is very old. This mound, Saul's Mound, is dated to about 100 BC. And it's from core samples. Again, it's not been dug into. It probably has a gigantic tomb at its base.
Wow.
And it would be quite a task trying to excavate this mound.
Without excavating it, would it be possible to use ground penetrating radar to at least determine the presence of cavities?
They've tried. It won't go that deep. Ground penetrating radar won't go that deep. It's like Monk's Mound. They've done ground penetrating radar at Monk's Mound at Cahokia. But what they found is a big layer of stone down there. Monk's Mound has an anomaly in it. Monk's Mound is the largest mound in the United States. It's 100 feet tall. It is somewhere between 14 acres and 17 acres, depending on when it was measured because of erosion. And it covers more acreage than the Great Pyramid at Giza does.
Wow.
There are sites in America like the Newark earthworks, which are the largest geometric earthworks in the world.
Mhm.
Well, just one enclosure at Newark, earthen enclosure, you could put 4 great pyramids inside and have some room left over. That
Mhm.
is how big those earthworks are in
Wow.
Newark, Ohio.
Wow.
So people just don't know. People do not, Americans don't appreciate what we have here. And it's a shame. You brought up earlier about artifacts being removed and pulled out of display at museums. It's a shame because we have so many incredible artifacts, millions, hundreds of millions of artifacts have been pulled from mounds in America. And that is a shame because it was a desecration. But the truth is, that's how we know about how incredible that culture was. And most of those are now being pulled from display. And how do I know it's hundreds of millions? One site in Louisiana, has had several million artifacts pulled from it, and that's the Poverty Point site in Louisiana. And it dates to 1800 BC. It's 3,800 years old. And they found nearly 2 million artifacts at that one site.
It's a bit.
Go ahead.
It's okay. It's just a bit laughable to me that I grew up thinking that learning that these people were hunter gatherers when they were obviously anything but. When they're building hundreds of thousands of mounds, thousands of complexes. I wonder. We're getting close to the end here, and I wanted to just ask you sort of a question to round things out. You mentioned at the beginning this sort of task you've been forced to take on. Why did you use the word forced, and where is this going? Like, is there an end to this for you?
Well, I'm working on the 3rd edition of the Mound Encyclopedia to update. And then I plan on doing a book on artifacts, full color book on artifacts. The Mound Encyclopedia has to be in black and white. Just in terms of economics, nobody is going to be able to afford it in full color because we're not going to have it printed in Singapore or China.
Sure.
And in the United States, it's not feasible to do that at an inexpensive price. So where it's going, those books have to be done. And I am 75 years old. So I have no idea how much longer I will be here. And my path, I'm just continuing on this path. And I'm okay with it. I'll do the next version of the Mound Encyclopedia. I don't know if I'll ever do one after it because I'm totally rewriting this version. The second version was a major addition and correction, and I put things in there that were new in it. This one is a much bigger rewrite. So where it goes beyond this, I'll solve the great mystery, and I will discover if the path of souls is real or not. And that's what happens with death. They would often say, I'm going to solve the great mystery. Whether or not you remember it is another question. They believed in reincarnation.
Yep.
They didn't believe that everybody reincarnated. They also believed that some people could resurrect, which is why some people were put in tombs. Leaders and elite people were put in the tombs in the hope that they would literally resurrect and come back. Reincarnation is another story, and reincarnation was done when you had some errors to correct in the next life. People that led a life that they didn't need to make corrections in could go on to the other world. And that's what the path of souls was about. And that's what solving the great mystery was. So ultimately, we solved the great mystery. So that's where I'm headed.
Me too, I guess.
Eventually, sooner or later, we all get to that point. And no matter what you believe that happens, in one way or another, we all solve the mystery. Now, maybe it's lights out. I had a period in my life and when I was thoroughly indoctrinated in psychopharmacology and biology and neurobiology, that when brain function ended, it was lights out. It was absolute nothingness. You simply ceased to exist. That is what they taught. And for quite a bit of time, that is what I believed. I don't believe that anymore, but I don't pretend to know what's on the other side.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust you if you did.
Excellent. I do know what Native American shamans say, and I tend to lean toward the shaman's belief system. And by the way, you mentioned at the very beginning, you mentioned Edgar Cayce, and I know there's not a time here to talk about Edgar Cayce, but Edgar Cayce is often described as a psychic. But in truth, Edgar Cayce did exactly what Native American shaman and medicine men did. The shaman went into a trance, and shaman would go to the other world for information, to the upper or the lower worlds for information. Shaman would sometimes go and ask, what is going to happen to the tribe? What can we do to change this? Shaman also functioned as intermediaries for the people. Shaman also functioned as medicine men. Not all shaman were medicine people, but many of them were. Shaman would live alone. The tribe might send a runner to the shaman and say, hey, the chief is sick. We need to find out what's wrong. The shaman would go into a trance, and the shaman would then diagnose what was wrong. And the shaman would prescribe something to help the chief. Sometimes the shaman would say, there is nothing we can do. But they would often prescribe very simple herbs and other remedies. And all of those things are exactly what Edgar Cayce did. Edgar Cayce, in truth, was one of the very first historic modern shaman. He himself never said he was a psychic. That was the early newspapers. Cayce went into trance, and they often say, oh, he diagnosed people by going into a trance and they weren't anywhere near him. Well, that's true. Exactly what shaman often did. And all of his remedies were from readily available substances, although he'd often have to tell the people asking for his readings where the substances were. Shaman Edgar Cayce never said too that exactly on this day this is what's going to happen.
That's right.
Edgar Cayce's so-called predictions were this is what's going to happen if something doesn't change. Even the being in the ARE itself and one of the spokespeople for the ARE for many, many years. That's the official organization. I can tell you that Cayce never gave a prediction where he said on this date something's going to happen. He often, like his prediction about the Great Depression, he gave 2 readings that said that there is a great disturbance occurring here. And he was telling a man had asked him for a reading on financial advice. And he told the guy, you need to get out of the stock market because there is a great disturbance coming. He didn't say when it was coming, but he said the first one he gave about 9 months before it happened. And the second reading he gave was about 3 months before it happened. And that's been widely touted as well. He predicted the collapse of the stock market. Well, he didn't say exactly when it was going to occur, but he told a guy, there's a big disturbance coming and you should probably move your money out of the stock market. By the way, the guy didn't follow his advice.
Yikes.
Are you familiar with the future forecasting group? They basically they kind of do remote viewing remote viewing targets. They share the results with each other, and sometimes post the stuff on the internet on YouTube. It's very interesting data points.
I am slightly familiar with it. I have participated in a couple of the remote viewing things on the internet where they'll show an envelope and say, what's the drawing in it? And I've done that a few times. I've never been right or close to being right. But then I draw little stick people. So, yeah.
So you can't remote view, you can't bend spoons. No. But you are on some kind of mission that's from somewhere that you're not sure of where you're getting it from.
Well, I pretty much know where it's from. I told you there's other dreams and things that I haven't shared with you that
sure.
Luckily we've run out of time here. So, and I have at the last conference that I spoke at, it was over a year ago. It was in Boca Raton, Florida, and it was to a group of Casey people, a pretty large conference. And I had publicly announced this is the last speaking engagement I'm making at a conference. And I had to do this because I get requests. I don't like doing conferences. I don't like public speaking anymore. I'm just tired of it. But I told them there at the end of it what was going on and where I think this came from. So how this happened to me. Why I was sort of chosen that you need to do this, Greg. You got to do this. That's and then when I decided I'm not going to do it, it's too much work. Then they came in, and forced me to. And it's something I've accepted and kind of understand. My wife has shockingly come to the conclusion that, oh my God, you're right. That's what's happened. So there you go.
We'll have to be continued that. I feel like I have 5,000 questions for you, but
there are dozens of things we could talk about. Thank you so much for your time. It was great to meet you today.
Well, good to meet you guys, and we'll pick this up at some time. Let me know when you want to do it. Like I say, I'm giving some talks to kids tomorrow, so I'm not really excited about that. A group of 7th graders kind of scares me.
Well, that scares me too, but I believe in you, Greg. You can do it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and it's been a pleasure, guys.
Yeah, we'll reach out in a few months and see if we can get you back on.
Okay, will do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Little.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Greg. Bye.
Thank you.